The road begins where the pavement runs out of Chicago and heads west, a two-lane blacktop that cuts through the heart of the country like a long, straight promise. It is called Route 66, and for the better part of a century, it has carried the dreams, the desperation, and the sheer audacity of a nation on the move. Before it was a highway, before it was a legend, it was just an idea, a continuous strip of concrete and asphalt linking the shores of Lake Michigan to the Pacific Ocean. That idea, simple as it sounds, changed America forever. Think of America before Route 66. In the 1920s, the country was still a patchwork of local roads, dirt and gravel tracks that turned to mud in the rain, a system that made any kind of long-distance travel an adventure you did not undertake lightly. If you wanted to drive from Chicago to Los Angeles, you did not just get in your car and go. You consulted a pile of maps, you asked locals for directions at every fork, and you prayed your tires could handle the ruts. The federal government recognized the need for a national highway system, and in 1926 they numbered the routes. Route 66 was born, but it was not yet the road we remember. It was a line on a map, a series of existing roads cobbled together, waiting for someone to pave it. And pave it they did. The work began in earnest in the mid-1920s and continued through the Great Depression. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal programs put thousands of men to work on the road. They swung picks, shoveled gravel, and laid asphalt under a blazing sun, earning a wage that meant the difference between eating and not eating for their families. Those men built the backbone of the Mother Road, 1 mile at a time. By 1938, Route 66 was fully paved from Chicago to Santa Monica, but it was not the pavement that made it special. It was the path it took. Most transcontinental highways before Route 66 took a straight, direct line, following the old railroad corridors. But Route 66 was different. It zigzagged through small towns, dipping south to bring traffic through places like Springfield, Missouri, and Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and Amarillo, Texas. The planners understood that a road is not just a way to get from one coast to another. It is a lifeline for the communities it touches. Every town along the route suddenly had a reason to exist. Motels, gas stations, diners, and souvenir shops sprang up like wildflowers after a spring rain. Route 66 became the main street of America, and then the Dust Bowl came. In the 1930s, the Great Plains turned to dust. The topsoil lifted into the sky and darkened the sun. Farms dried up and blew away. Families packed everything they owned into jalopies, old cars that were held together with baling wire and hope. They looked west, they looked to California, and the only road that could take them there all the way was Route 66. John Steinbeck called it the Mother Road in his novel The Grapes of Wrath, and the name stuck. Those families drove their overloaded cars over the long, hot pavement, their faces weary but their eyes fixed on the horizon. They did not know what they would find in California. They only knew they had to leave behind everything they had lost. That migration changed the demographic face of the country. Millions of people from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Missouri poured into California, bringing their music, their religion, their hardscrabble work ethic. They were mocked as Okies, but they were the backbone of the agricultural labor that fed the nation. Route 66 carried them, and in carrying them, it transformed not just California but the entire American West. After World War II, the country exploded with prosperity. Soldiers came home, started families, bought houses, and bought cars. The automobile became the center of American life, and there was no better place to drive that new car than Route 66. The road entered its golden age. It was the ultimate road trip. Families packed their children into station wagons, loaded the roof rack with suitcases, and set out to see America. They stopped at the Indian trading posts in the Southwest, the giant meteor crater in Arizona, the painted desert, the petrified forest. They bought rubber tomahawks and postcards and bottles of colored sand. They ate at mom-and-pop diners where the coffee was always hot and the pie was always fresh. They slept in motor courts with neon signs blinking vacancy into the desert night. The road itself became a character. It had its own music, from the jazz of Chicago to the cowboy ballads of Texas to the surf rock of California. Nat King Cole sang about getting your kicks on Route 66, and that became the anthem of an entire generation. The road was freedom. It was the open highway, the wind in your hair, the promise that if you just kept driving, something better was waiting just over the next hill. But even as the road reached its peak of popularity, the forces that would eventually kill it were already at work. The interstate highway system, championed by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, began construction in the 1950s. The interstates were fast, four-lane divided highways that bypassed the little towns. They were designed for speed, not for stopping. A driver on the interstate could cross the country in 3 days instead of 2 weeks. They did not need to slow down for a traffic light in a dusty Arizona town. They did not need to buy gas at a mom-and-pop station. They just kept going. Route 66 began to wither. The businesses that had thrived for decades saw their customers disappear. The neon signs flickered and died. The motels closed their doors. The gas stations became weeds. By the 1970s, the road was officially decommissioned, its signs taken down, its number removed from the map. It was no longer a highway. It was just a collection of old roads, some of them broken, some of them still in use but no longer connected. The mother road was dead, except it was not. The people who remembered it kept its memory alive. They formed associations. They placed commemorative signs along the old route. They restored the old motels and gas stations. They turned Route 66 into a living museum, a ghost that still walks the earth. Today, driving Route 66 is a pilgrimage. Tourists from all over the world come to experience a piece of Americana that no longer exists anywhere else. But the road did not just change America by existing. It changed America by proving that a simple ribbon of pavement could shape a nation's destiny. It opened the West to tourism, to migration, to commerce. It created a shared culture of the road, a sense that every American had the right to get in a car and go anywhere. It made the automobile the symbol of personal freedom. And it showed that the journey matters every bit as much as the destination. The Dust Bowl migrants, the post-war vacationers, the beat poets and the hippies, the truck drivers and the salesmen, the families and the loners, all of them rolled down that road, and they left a little bit of themselves in the asphalt. Route 66 is not just a road, it is a story, and that story is the story of America. But to understand how a road could become the story of a nation, you have to take a closer look at the lives it touched. Let me tell you about a few of them. There was a man named Bob Waldmeyer, a name that might not ring a bell for most, but for those who love Route 66, he is a legend. Bob was an artist, a free spirit who spent decades traveling the road in a converted school bus, painting detailed maps and postcards of the landmarks he loved. He grew up in a family that ran a motel and a restaurant on the highway in Illinois, and from the moment he could hold a crayon, he was drawing the road. Bob's art became a record of a disappearing world. He captured the faded neon of the Coral Court Motel in St. Louis, the whimsical diner shaped like a giant teapot in Arizona, the gas stations with their old manual pumps that smelled of gasoline and dust. Bob did not just draw these places. He lived in them, talked to the owners, listened to their stories. And when the road was officially decommissioned in 1985, Bob was one of the first to say that its spirit would never die. He spent the rest of his life preserving its memory, and his maps became the guidebooks for a new generation of pilgrims. Bob Waldmeyer passed away in 2009, but his legacy lives on in every traveler who stops to photograph a crumbling motel sign. Then there were the people like the ones I met in Tucumcari, New Mexico, a town that once boasted over 2,000 motel rooms along Route 66. Tucumcari was a boomtown in the 50s and 60s. Every room was filled every night with families heading west. The neon signs were so bright they lit up the desert for miles. The Blue Swallow Motel, with its iconic blue neon bird, was the crown jewel. But when the interstate bypassed Tucumcari in the 70s, the traffic vanished overnight. The motels closed one by one. The signs went dark. The town shrank, but a few stubborn souls refused to let it die. They bought the old motels, restored them, and opened them again. Today, the Blue Swallow still glows blue at night. The owners, a couple named Kevin and Nancy, will tell you stories of the guests who come from Japan, from Germany, from Australia, all of them searching for a piece of the old road. They sit on the porch chairs and watch the headlights of the occasional car pass by, and for a moment, it is 1955 again. And think of the music. Nat King Cole's song Get Your Kicks on Route 66 is famous, but it was not the only one. Countless musicians wrote songs about that highway. The road had a rhythm, a pulse. In the 1960s, a television show called Route 66 aired for 4 seasons, following 2 young men who traveled the road in a Chevrolet Corvette, having adventures in every town. The show made the road a symbol of youth and rebellion. It was not just a highway, it was a destination in itself. And then there were the beat poets. Jack Kerouac may have written about the road in On the Road, but his characters traveled mostly on older highways. Still, the spirit of the open road permeated the entire beat generation. They hitchhiked, they drove beat-up cars, they sought the raw, unfiltered America that could only be found on the back roads. Route 66 was the spine of that quest. The road also became a canvas for art. In 1974, a wealthy eccentric named Stanley Marsh III commissioned a public art installation near Amarillo, Texas. He took 10 old Cadillacs, buried them nose first in the ground at the same angle as the Great Pyramid of Giza, and called it Cadillac Ranch. It sat right alongside the old alignment of Route 66. Over the years, visitors have spray painted the cars, added their own graffiti, turned the installation into an ever-changing monument to American car culture. Cadillac Ranch is one of the most photographed spots on the entire route. It captures everything about the road: the love of automobiles, the sense of humor, the willingness to embrace the weird and the wonderful. But the road was not always a source of joy. For many, it was a path of desperation. During the Dust Bowl, families traveled west not for adventure but for survival. I once spoke to an elderly woman in Bakersfield, California, whose parents had driven from Oklahoma in 1936. Her name was Mary, and she was just a baby at the time. She told me how her father had sold everything they owned to buy a used Model T, how they loaded it with blankets, a few clothes, and a sack of potatoes. They drove for 2 weeks, sleeping by the side of the road, fixing flat tires with strips of rubber. Her mother cooked over a campfire. Her father drove with his eyes fixed on the horizon, never looking back. When they finally crossed the border into California, they were stopped by police who called them Okies and told them to keep moving. But Mary's father found work picking cotton, then later in a factory. Mary grew up to become a teacher. She said that road gave her family a second chance, even if it was a hard one. The road also changed the way Americans ate. Before Route 66, roadside dining was mostly a matter of sandwiches packed at home or the occasional diner in a town. But the highway spawned a whole new culture of fast food, a term that did not exist until the 50s. The first McDonald's restaurant was not on Route 66, but the principles of fast, affordable food that it popularized spread along the highway. You could get a hamburger and a milkshake in seconds, eat it in your car, and keep driving. The drive-in restaurant became an icon. In fact, one of the earliest drive-in chains, the Pig Stand, began in Texas along Route 66. The car hop, a young person on roller skates bringing food to your window, became a symbol of American teenage life. Route 66 made the car a dining room, a living room, a bedroom even, as people slept in their cars at roadside camps. And let us not forget the architecture. The road was a living museum of 20th century design. The motels ranged from rustic cabins to sleek modern motor courts with streamlined neon signs. The gas stations were little temples of commerce, with their swooping rooflines and glowing logos. There were trading posts shaped like giant teepees, restaurants shaped like giant coffee pots, and one famous motel in Holbrook, Arizona, where you can sleep in a concrete wigwam. The Wigwam Motel, built in 1950, still operates today, and each wigwam is a tiny concrete tipi with a wooden door and a small window. Inside, the rooms are surprisingly comfortable, with vintage furniture and a television. But the real draw is the feeling of stepping into a mid-century postcard. The Wigwam Motel is a time capsule, a reminder that Route 66 was not just a road, but a stage for the American imagination. The road also played a role in the civil rights movement. In the 1940s and 50s, African American travelers faced segregation and discrimination across the country. Route 66, like all highways, was not exempt. Black families could not simply stop at any motel or restaurant. They relied on a guide called the Negro Motorist Green Book, which listed businesses that would serve them. Some of those businesses were on Route 66. In Springfield, Missouri, there was a motel called the Dunbar that welcomed black travelers. In Oklahoma City, there was a restaurant called the High de Ho. These places were oases of safety and dignity on a road that often offered neither. The Green Book itself was a symbol of resilience. It allowed families to travel with a measure of confidence, knowing they could find a place to sleep, a meal to eat. The road, for all its promise of freedom, was not free for everyone, but the people who used the Green Book paved the way for the broader struggle for equality. Their stories are part of the highway's legacy. Today, driving Route 66 is an act of preservation. You can still follow the old route from Chicago to Santa Monica, but you have to navigate a maze of frontage roads, state highways, and city streets. Some sections are gone, buried under interstates or paved over by new development. Others are abandoned, their asphalt cracked and weed-choked, but enough remains to give you a taste of what it was like. You can still see the faded Burmashave signs, the old gas pumps with glass cylinders on top, the ghost towns where the only business left is a souvenir shop run by a retiree who remembers when traffic was endless. One of the most remarkable stretches is the section through the Mojave Desert, between Barstow and Needles, California. This is the heart of the road, a long, lonely ribbon of asphalt that cuts through the harsh landscape. The heat shimmers off the pavement. The silence is profound. You can pull over and stand on the road, and for a moment you can almost hear the ghosts of the past. The rumble of a 1950 Cadillac, the laughter of children in the back seat, the voice of a mother singing along to the radio. The road here has been designated a National Scenic Byway, and efforts are underway to preserve it as a historic route. Signs mark the old alignment, and volunteers maintain the pavement. It is a fragile monument, but it endures. And then there is the end of the road, Santa Monica Pier. The official terminus is at the intersection of Ocean Avenue and Colorado Avenue, where a plaque marks the spot. When you finally arrive, after days or weeks of driving, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You have followed the path of so many before you. You have seen the flatlands of Illinois, the rolling hills of Missouri, the plains of Oklahoma, the red dirt of Texas, the mesas of New Mexico, the deserts of Arizona, the mountains of California. You have eaten at diners where the waitress calls you honey. You have slept in motels where the owner shows you a photo album of famous guests. You have bought rubber tomahawks and postcards and bottles of colored sand. You have gotten your kicks, but the story does not end there. The road continues to change America, even today. In the early 2000s, a movement began to officially recognize Route 66 as a National Historic Trail. It took years of advocacy, but in 1990, the Route 66 Association was formed. In 2009, the National Park Service completed a study recommending its inclusion in the National Trail System. And in 2020, the Route 66 National Historic Trail was officially designated. That means federal resources are now dedicated to preserving and interpreting the road. It is no longer just a highway, it is a heritage asset. Schools use it to teach history. Communities use it to attract tourists. Artists use it as inspiration. The road, in a sense, has been reborn, and the people who drive it today are not just tourists, they are pilgrims. They come from every corner of the world. I met a couple from Germany who had rented a classic Mustang and spent 3 weeks driving the entire route. They had a map on their dashboard covered in notes. They were looking for the exact spot where their grandfather, a German immigrant, had taken a photograph in 1952. They found it, a gas station now closed but still standing. They took a photo from the same angle and they cried. That is what Route 66 does. It connects people across time and space. The road also inspires new dreams. Every year there are festivals, car shows, and parades along the route. In Flagstaff, Arizona, the annual Route 66 Day celebration draws thousands. In Springfield, Illinois, the International Route 66 Festival brings together fans from around the globe. The road is a living community, a network of people who share a love for a strip of asphalt that is, in the end, just a road. But it is not just a road, it is a story, and that story is still being written. So if you ever have the chance, get in your car, point it west, and follow the old yellow line. You will not just see America, you will feel it. The heat of the desert, the taste of a cherry pie, the sound of a jukebox playing in a bar that has not changed since 1958. You will understand why the road mattered and why it still matters. You will become part of the story, and that is how Route 66 changed America forever, not just by connecting two coasts, but by connecting all of us to each other, to our past, and to the endless horizon. But to truly understand how Route 66 changed America, we have to look beyond the asphalt and the neon. We have to listen to the voices of the people who lived and worked along its length, and the artists who transformed it into a myth. The road was not just a physical corridor, it was a canvas for the American imagination, and that imagination did not stop with the diners and motels. It spilled into music, literature, and film, creating a cultural echo that still reverberates. Consider the music. Route 66 was immortalized in song by the likes of Nat King Cole, who recorded the most famous version of Get Your Kicks on Route 66 in 1946. That song, with its jaunty piano and easygoing vocals, turned the highway into a travelogue. It named the towns in order: St. Louis, Joplin, Oklahoma City, Amarillo, Gallup, Flagstaff, Winona, Kingman, Barstow, San Bernardino. It was a kind of verbal map, a sonic guide for anyone who wanted to hit the road. But the song also did something deeper. It taught Americans that their geography was a kind of poetry, that the names of places could be strung together like a song. That idea, that the road itself was a melody, became a cornerstone of American identity. Then came the Beat Generation. Jack Kerouac's novel On the Road, published in 1957, was about a cross-country journey that largely followed the old highways, including Route 66. Kerouac's protagonist, Sal Paradise, drove from New York to Denver and then to California, chasing jazz, poetry, and the raw pulse of America. The book was a sensation. It made the open road a symbol of rebellion, of freedom from suburban conformity. Suddenly, every young person with a driver's license dreamed of hitchhiking across the country, of sleeping in fields, of meeting strangers. Route 66 was the backbone of that dream. Kerouac wrote about the neon signs, the all-night diners, the lonely stretches of desert. He captured the thrill of motion, the feeling that you could leave your past behind and become someone new. That idea, that the road offered redemption, became part of the national psyche. The road also inspired a generation of photographers and painters. In the 1960s, the photographer Ed Ruscha made a book called 26 Gasoline Stations, a deadpan documentation of the gas stations along Route 66 between Los Angeles and Oklahoma City. The images are stark and almost clinical, but they reveal the strange beauty of the roadside landscape. Rush's work influenced a whole movement of artists who saw the American highway as a subject worthy of serious attention. The same was true for the painter David Hockney, who created a photo collage called Pier Blossom Highway, a fractured, obsessive view of a stretch of road in California. The highway became art, not just a way to get from one place to another. And then there was the small screen. In the 1960s, the television series Route 66 aired on CBS. It was not about the road itself, but about two young men who traveled the country in a Chevrolet Corvette, having adventures and helping people. The show was filmed on location across the United States, and it featured the actual highway as a backdrop. It was one of the first TV shows to treat the American landscape as a character, to use the open road as a setting for stories about justice and friendship. The show ran for 4 seasons, and it made the Corvette an icon. But more importantly, it reinforced the idea that the highway was a place of possibility, where strangers could become friends and problems could be solved. It was a kind of fantasy, but it was a fantasy rooted in the real geography of Route 66. The road also left its mark on literature in more subtle ways. John Steinbeck, who called Route 66 the mother road in The Grapes of Wrath, wrote about it again in his later book Travels with Charlie. In 1960, Steinbeck set out in a pickup truck with his dog Charlie to rediscover America. He traveled the old roads, including stretches of Route 66, and he wrote about what he saw. He found a country that was changing, that was becoming homogenized by interstates and chain stores. He mourned the loss of the old roadside culture, the mom-and-pop diners, the quirky motels, the sense of local character. Travels with Charlie is a bittersweet book, but it is also a testament to the power of the road. Steinbeck understood that the highway was a mirror, reflecting both the best and worst of America. His voice, wise and melancholy, reminds us that the road is not just a physical thing. It is a memory, a story we tell ourselves about who we are. The highway's influence on film is equally profound. The 1969 movie Easy Rider, which follows 2 bikers from Los Angeles to New Orleans, used the byways of the Southwest, including stretches of Route 66. The film was a counterculture landmark, a meditation on freedom and the end of the American dream. The soundtrack, with songs like Born to Be Wild, became an anthem for a generation. The road was no longer just a pathway. It was a symbol of rebellion, of the search for something authentic in a plastic world. That movie, more than any other, cemented the relationship between the open road and the idea of personal liberation. And then, decades later, the same road inspired a children's movie that became a global phenomenon. In 2006, Pixar released Cars, a story set in a fictional town called Radiator Springs, which was based on real towns along Route 66 like Galena, Kansas, and Peach Springs, Arizona. The movie was about a race car who gets stranded on the old highway and learns to appreciate the slower pace of life, the importance of community, and the history of the road. The filmmakers did extensive research along Route 66, and the movie is filled with references to real places and characters. The Rusty Toe Truckmater was inspired by a real mechanic in Arkansas. The neon-lit Cozy Cone Motel was based on the Wigwam Motel. The character of Sally, a Porsche who runs a motel, represents the preservationist spirit of people fighting to keep the old road alive. Cars was a huge hit, and it sparked a renewed interest in Route 66. Children who saw the movie wanted to go on a road trip. Parents took them. Tourism along the route spiked. The movie, in a way, saved parts of the highway that were on the verge of disappearing. It gave the old road a new generation of fans. The great irony of Route 66 is that its decline made it even more beloved. When the interstates began to bypass the towns along the route, the businesses faltered. Many closed. The neon signs went dark. The towns shrank. Some became ghost towns, but the people who stayed did not forget. They formed associations, held festivals, and lobbied for preservation. In the 1980s, a barber named Angel Delgadillo in Seligman, Arizona, started the historic Route 66 Association of Arizona. He and other locals gathered to clean up the old road, put up signs, and promote the route as a scenic drive. Angel became known as the guardian angel of Route 66. His barber shop, which he had run for decades, became a tourist attraction. He would cut hair and tell stories, and visitors from all over the world would come to meet him. He was a living symbol of the road's resilience. Even after he retired, his barbershop remained open as a museum. Angel passed away in 2021, but his spirit lives on in every festival and every sign. The preservation movement grew. In each state along the route, volunteers marked the old alignments with signs, often brown with white lettering or the classic black and white shield. They published maps and guidebooks. They organized caravans and cruises. They turned abandoned gas stations into museums. The road, which had been dying, became a living history project. The National Park Service got involved, and in 2020, the Route 66 National Historic Trail was officially established. That designation means federal money is available for maintenance and interpretation, but more importantly, it elevates the road to the status of the Appalachian Trail or the Lewis and Clark Trail. It is recognized as a vital part of American heritage, but preservation is not just about signs and plaques. It is about people. One of the most remarkable figures in the modern story of Route 66 is a woman named Bob Waldmeyer. He was an artist, a hippie, a vegetarian, and a lifelong traveler of the road. He drove a converted school bus painted with scenes of the highway, and he sold hand-drawn maps of Route 66 at stops along the way. His maps were works of art, filled with tiny details about diners, motels, and attractions. He knew every mile of the road, and he spent decades documenting it. Bob Waldmeyer became a folk hero, a kind of patron saint of the Mother Road. He died in 2009, but his maps are still sold, and his legacy lives on in the people he inspired. There's also the story of the Blue Swallow Motel in Tucumcari, New Mexico. The motel was built in 1939, and it has been run by the same family for decades. The current owners, Kevin and Nancy Mueller, bought it in 2012 and restored it lovingly. The neon sign, a blue swallow with open wings, is one of the most photographed on the entire route. The motel rooms are decorated in vintage style, with period furniture and tile bathrooms. Staying at the Blue Swallow is like stepping back in time. The owners greet you personally, show you to your room, and tell you about the history. They are part of a network of small business owners who keep the old road alive, not for profit alone, but for love. They understand that they are caretakers of a legacy. And then there is the more somber side of the story. Not every town survived. Some are nearly empty, with boarded-up storefronts and crumbling pavement. The town of Texola, Oklahoma, at the border with Texas, has a population of less than 40. There used to be a bustling main street, but now there is only a single store and a post office. The old hotel is a ruin, yet even in Texola there are signs of life. A couple of artists bought the old church and turned it into a studio. A farmer sells homemade jams from a roadside stand. The road, even when it is fading, still draws people who see beauty in decay. The story of Route 66 is also a story of the environment. The highway traverses some of the most fragile landscapes in the country, from the prairies of the Great Plains to the deserts of the Southwest. The dust storms that drove the Okies westward were a symptom of poor land management, but they also taught Americans about the importance of conservation. The highway itself became a source of pollution and habitat fragmentation, but today, preservation efforts often go hand in hand with environmental awareness. The National Scenic Byway designation encourages sustainable tourism. Visitors are urged to stay on the road, not to disturb the desert tortoises or the ancient petroglyphs. Some stretches have been turned into hiking and biking trails. The old road is being reimagined as a green corridor, but perhaps the most profound way Route 66 changed America is in the way it taught us to see our own country. Before the highway, most Americans thought of the nation in terms of regions: the East, the Midwest, the South, the West. The road connected them, but it also revealed the differences. Driving from Chicago to Los Angeles, you pass through the cornfields of Illinois, the Ozark Hills of Missouri, the cattle ranches of Texas, the painted desert of Arizona. Each place has its own accent, its own food, its own way of life. The highway did not erase those differences, it made them visible. It turned America into a mosaic, a collection of distinct but connected places. And that understanding that we are one nation made of many is at the heart of the American identity. Today, the road is a classroom. School groups take field trips along Route 66 to learn about history and geography. Universities offer courses on its cultural significance. There are documentaries and books and podcasts. The road has become a textbook, with every mile teaching a lesson. And the lessons are not all cheerful. The highway also tells the story of racism, of economic inequality, of environmental damage, but it tells those stories honestly, and that is why it matters. If you drive the road now, you will see the scars, the closed motels with their broken windows, the gas stations where the pumps have been removed, the faded signs that once glowed with promise, but you will also see the new life, the coffee shop opened by a young couple who moved from Brooklyn, the artist residency in an old trading post, the annual car show that draws a crowd of thousands. The road is a living thing, constantly changing, constantly fighting to stay alive. The great writer William Least Heatmoon traveled Route 66 in his book Blue Highways, a journey that celebrated the back roads of America. He wrote about a woman he met in a diner who said, "The road is a long line of stories." And it is. Every person who ever drove that road carried a story with them, and they left a piece of it behind. The hitchhiker who got a ride and never forgot the driver who gave him a sandwich. The family who stopped at a roadside zoo and still have a faded photograph with a monkey. The soldier who shipped out from a bus depot and never came back. Those stories are the real pavement of Route 66, and that is why we keep coming back. That is why the road is still alive, even after the interstates tried to kill it, because we need stories. We need to know that someone else has been where we are going, that the horizon is not just an end but a beginning. Route 66 gave us that. It gave us a way to measure our lives, to mark our journeys, to understand that the road is not just a path from one place to another. It is the place itself. And it will never truly disappear, as long as there is someone who remembers the sound of tires on asphalt, the smell of sagebrush at dawn, the taste of a malt shake on a summer afternoon. So keep driving, the road is waiting. So keep driving, the road is waiting. And as you drive, you begin to understand that the road is not just a ribbon of asphalt, but a living thing, a muscle that flexes with the seasons, a memory that pulses in the neon glow of a motel sign. The road is waiting for you to add your story to the millions already embedded in its surface. And the stories keep coming. They come from the people who still live along the route, the ones who inherited the diners and the gas stations and the souvenir shops from their grandparents. They come from the travelers who come from Japan or Germany or Australia, clutching faded postcards and vintage maps, hoping to find the America they saw in movies. They come from the artists who paint murals on the walls of abandoned buildings, turning decay into art. The road is never done with us, and we are never done with it. Consider the story of the Wigwam Motel in Hallbrook, Arizona. It is one of the most iconic stops on the entire route, a row of concrete teepees painted in bright colors, each one a tiny room with a curved ceiling and a bed shaped like a wagon. The motel was built in 1950 by a man named Chester Lewis, who wanted to capture the romance of the West. For decades, it was a favorite stop for families driving to the Grand Canyon. But when the interstate came, business dried up. The motel changed hands several times, and by the 1990s it was in disrepair. Then a couple named Dan and Millie bought it, and they began a painstaking restoration. They peeled off layers of paint, repaired the concrete, and rewired the electrical. They brought back the original neon sign. They filled the rooms with period furniture. Today, the Wigwam Motel is one of the few surviving examples of the tourist architecture that once dotted the route. Guests still come from all over the world to sleep in a teepee, to feel the ghost of a road trip from a half-century ago. The motel is a testament to the idea that the past can be preserved, not as a museum piece, but as a living experience. Then there is the town of Adrian, Texas, which sits at the midpoint of Route 66, exactly 1,139 miles from Chicago and 1,139 miles from Los Angeles. In Adrian, there is a gas station called the Midpoint Cafe, which has been serving travelers since 1928. The cafe is famous for its ugly crust pie, a concoction of fruit and pastry that looks terrible and tastes wonderful. The current owner, Tom, bought the place in 2013 after a career in corporate America. He had always dreamed of owning a slice of the Mother Road. He renovated the cafe, kept the old signs, and continued the tradition of serving pie to anyone who walked in. But the cafe almost closed during the pandemic. Business dropped to almost nothing. Then a group of loyal customers started a GoFundMe page, and within weeks they had raised enough money to keep the doors open. The cafe survived. That is the power of the road. It creates a community that transcends geography. People who have never met will rally to save a pie shop in a town of fewer than 200 people, simply because that pie shop is part of the story. And speaking of pie, the road is also a culinary journey. Every diner has its specialty: the chicken fried steak in Oklahoma, the green chili cheeseburger in New Mexico, the deep dish pizza in Chicago, the tamales in Texas. The food along Route 66 is not fancy, but it is honest. It is the food of working people, of truck drivers and traveling salesmen and families on a budget. There is a diner in Seligman, Arizona, called the Roadkill Cafe, where the menu features items like possum poutine and Fender fried chicken. The owner, a man named Juan, insists the meat is all from regular suppliers, but the joke is part of the charm. The diner is a gathering place for bikers and tourists and locals, all sitting together at formica tables, sharing stories about the road. The food is secondary to the experience. What matters is the feeling of belonging, of being part of a tribe that understands the call of the horizon. But the road is not just about nostalgia. It is also a place of innovation. In the early days, the highway was a laboratory for new ideas in business and travel. The first drive-through restaurant was not at a fast food chain. It was at a place called the Pig Stand in Dallas, which opened in 1921 and was soon copied all along the route. The first motel, the Motel Inn in San Luis Obispo, opened in 1925 and set the standard for cheap, clean lodging. The first self-service gas station appeared on Route 66 in the 1930s, a concept that seemed crazy at the time but eventually became the norm. The road was a proving ground for the American way of life, a place where entrepreneurs could test their ideas and see if they would fly. And then there is the music. Route 66 has its own soundtrack, a mix of blues, country, rock and roll, and folk. The most famous song, of course, is Get Your Kicks on Route 66, written by Bobby Troup in 1946 and recorded by Nat King Cole. But there are hundreds of other songs that celebrate the road, from the Allman Brothers' Midnight Rider to Bruce Springsteen's Thunder Road. The highway inspired a genre of road music, songs about freedom and escape and the open road. In the 1950s, car culture and rock and roll grew up together, and Route 66 was their main artery. Teenagers would pile into convertibles and drive for hours, listening to the radio, looking for adventure. The road became a symbol of rebellion, a way to leave behind the constraints of small-town life. It is no accident that the hit television show Route 66, which ran from 1960 to 1964, featured two young men driving a Corvette across the country, having adventures and meeting interesting people. The show captured the spirit of the age, a time when the road meant possibility. The road also shaped American literature. John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath is the most famous example, but there are countless other books that use Route 66 as a backdrop. Jack Kerouac's On the Road, while not exclusively about Route 66, captured the same restless energy, the desire to keep moving, to see what was over the next hill. William Least Heatmoon's Blue Highways, which he wrote after a cross-country trip on the back roads, is a love letter to the byways of America, including long stretches of the old highway. More recently, writers like L.M. Jones and Michael Wallis have chronicled the road's history in meticulous detail. The road is a muse for writers, a source of endless stories. But perhaps the most important legacy of Route 66 is the way it taught Americans to see their country as a whole. Before the highway, most people lived their entire lives within a few miles of where they were born. Travel was expensive and difficult. The road changed that. It democratized travel. Suddenly, a family of modest means could pack up the car and see the Grand Canyon, or the Petrified Forest, or the Gateway Arch. It was not just about tourism, it was about understanding. When you drive from Chicago to Los Angeles, you see the country change. You see the flat farmland become the rolling Ozarks, then the open plains of Texas, then the high desert of New Mexico, then the red rocks of Arizona, then the mountains of California. You see the different ways people live, the different architecture, the different accents, the different foods. You realize that the United States is not a single thing but a collection of many things, held together by a common language and a common road. That understanding is fragile, and it is under threat from the homogenization of interstates and chain stores. But Route 66 preserves the memory of a time when every town was unique, when every mile had a story. And that is why the preservation movement is so important. It is not just about saving old buildings. It is about saving the idea of a road that connects us to each other and to our past. Every restored sign, every repainted mural, every reopened diner is a victory against the forces of forgetfulness. The people who run these businesses are not just entrepreneurs. They are historians, storytellers, caretakers of a legacy. They understand that the road is a living thing, and it needs to be fed with attention and love. So if you ever find yourself on Route 66, pull over at a roadside stand and buy a jar of honey from a man who keeps bees in the desert. Stop at a diner and order the pie, even if you're not hungry. Talk to the waitress. She might have been serving travelers for 30 years and she has seen it all. Walk into a motel that looks like it is from 1950 and ask about the owner's story. You will find that every person along the road has a story, and those stories are the real treasure. The road itself is just a stage. The actors are the people who live on it, and the play is never-ending. And then there is the sunset. On Route 66, the sunsets are legendary. In the desert, the sky turns orange and pink and purple, and the light seems to linger forever. You can stand on the side of the road and watch the colors change, and you feel small and huge at the same time. You feel connected to all the people who have watched the same sunsets before you, the Okies fleeing the dust, the soldiers heading to war, the honeymooners starting their lives together. You feel part of something larger than yourself. The road is waiting. And as long as there is someone willing to drive it, to tell its stories, to love its quirks and its flaws, it will never truly die. It will live on in the dreams of travelers, in the photographs on Instagram, in the memories of old-timers who remember when the highway was the only highway. It will live on in the sound of an engine humming at 70 miles an hour, in the smell of gasoline and hot asphalt, in the taste of a cold beer at a bar that has been there since the beginning. Route 66 changed America because it gave us a way to move, a way to grow, a way to become. And that is a legacy that will outlast the pavement itself. So keep driving. The road is waiting, and it always will be. But the story does not end there. The road has another layer, one that is not always visible in the postcards and the neon signs. It is the story of the people who were left behind, the communities that were bypassed when the interstate came through. In towns like Amboy, California, or Tucumcari, New Mexico, the silence is louder than any engine. The motels sit empty, their windows boarded up, their signs rusted and crooked. The gas stations are ghost stations, the pumps dry, the concrete cracked. But even in these places, there is a stubborn vitality. There is a man named Roy who runs the Amboy Schoolhouse, a tiny museum dedicated to the road. He lives alone in the desert, miles from the nearest grocery store, and he spends his days greeting the few travelers who wander off the interstate. He will tell you about the time a busload of Japanese tourists showed up, or the year a film crew came to shoot a commercial. He will show you the old photographs, the license plates from every state, the dusty arrowheads he found in the wash behind his house. Roy is not sad, he is proud, he is the keeper of the flame. And then there are the women of Route 66. The highway is often remembered as a man's world, a place of truck drivers and bikers and wandering poets. But women were always there, driving the diners, running the motels, painting the murals. There is a woman named Angelina who owns a curio shop in Vega, Texas, where she sells turquoise jewelry and hand-painted gourds. She learned the trade from her grandmother, who ran the same shop in the 1940s. Angelina will tell you about the dust storms that buried the highway in the 30s, about the soldiers who stopped for coffee on their way to war, about the day Elvis Presley pulled up in a pink Cadillac. She tells these stories with a calm voice, as if she has told them 1,000 times, but there is always a spark in her eyes. She knows that she is part of something bigger than herself. The road also shaped the way we think about distance. Before Route 66, a journey across the country was a major undertaking, a thing you did once in a lifetime if you were lucky. The highway made it routine. It made the country smaller, but it also made it larger because every mile became a story. There is a stretch in Oklahoma where the road runs straight for 40 miles, through grasslands that seem to go on forever. You can drive that stretch and feel like you are the last person on Earth. The sky is huge, the wind is constant, and the only sound is the hum of the tires. And then, without warning, you see a small sign, Rex's Garage, 10 miles ahead, and you realize that someone lives out there, someone who has chosen to be alone in the middle of the plains. Rex is a man in his 70s who still fixes cars by hand, who remembers when every Model T that broke down was towed to his shop by a team of horses. He will tell you about the time a rattlesnake crawled into his tool chest, or the winter when the snow drifted so high that the highway was closed for a week. He is a living archive. There is also the darkness. Route 66 is not all sunshine and curio shops. It has its share of tragedy. The highway was dangerous in the early days, with narrow bridges and sharp curves and no guardrails. There are stories of families who lost children in accidents, of truck drivers who fell asleep at the wheel, of hitchhikers who disappeared. In the Mojave Desert, there is a stretch called the Dip, where the road drops into a valley and then climbs out again. It was notorious for rollovers. The locals will tell you that on a quiet night, you can still hear the sound of metal scraping against rock. But even the tragedy is part of the road's memory. It reminds us that the freedom of the open road comes with a price. It is a covenant between the traveler and the land, a promise that we will take care of each other. And then there's the music that never stops. The song Get Your Kicks on Route 66 is the anthem, but the road has inspired everything from country ballads to heavy metal. There is a band in Springfield, Missouri, called the High Five that plays nothing but original songs about the highway. They have a song called The Mother Road Rumbles that starts with a low bass riff and builds into a wall of sound. The lead singer, a woman named Kate, says she wrote it after driving from Chicago to Los Angeles in a broken-down van. She felt the road in her bones. She saw the ghosts of the Dust Bowl migrants, the soldiers, the dreamers. She said the song is a prayer, a thank you to the asphalt that carried her home. The road also changed the way we eat, not just the diner food, but the way we think about food on the road. Before Route 66, travelers packed lunches or stopped at farmhouses for a meal. The highway created the concept of the road trip diet, something hot, something fast, something satisfying. The invention of the drive-thru was a revolution, but so was the rise of the truck stop. In the town of Shamrock, Texas, there is a giant truck stop called the Route 66 Truck Stop that has been in operation since 1940. It has a restaurant that serves chicken fried steak the size of a dinner plate, and the waitresses call everyone honey. The truck stop is a world unto itself, with a barber shop, a laundromat, and a chapel. Drivers sit in the lounge and watch old westerns on a television that is still black and white. They talk about the weather, the price of diesel, the families they left behind. The truck stop is a home away from home, a place where the road becomes a community. And then there is the language of the road. Route 66 gave us words and phrases that have entered the American lexicon. The Mother Road came from John Steinbeck. Main Street of America was a marketing slogan that stuck. Get Your Kicks became a synonym for fun. But there are also the local expressions, the slang that only makes sense in the context of the highway. In Arizona, they call a long stretch of straight road a straightaway. In Texas, they call a sudden dip a trough. In California, they call the final descent into the desert the grapevine. These words are the vocabulary of movement, a language that binds travelers together. The road also taught us about time. On the interstate, time is measured in minutes and hours in the distance between exits. On Route 66, time is measured in moments. It is the time it takes to watch a sunset change from gold to red to purple. It is the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee at a diner counter while a jukebox plays Patsy Cline. It is the time it takes to walk through a museum that used to be a gas station, reading the letters from old travelers who wrote about their journeys. The road slows you down. It forces you to pay attention. It reminds you that the destination is not the point. The point is the journey itself. And that is why the preservation movement is not just about nostalgia. It is about a way of seeing the world. In a time when everything is fast and digital and forgettable, Route 66 is a reminder that some things are worth taking slowly. It is a lesson in patience, in curiosity, in the joy of discovery. The people who run the motels and the diners and the gas stations are not just selling a service. They are selling an experience, a connection to something that is almost lost. They are the guardians of a treasure that cannot be replaced. So as you sit in your car, listening to the engine hum, think about the millions of people who have driven this road before you. Think about the hopes and dreams they carried. Think about the meals they ate, the songs they sang, the conversations they had. Think about the sunsets they watched, the same sunsets you are watching now. The road is a thread that connects you to them, a thread that stretches across time and space. It is fragile, but it is strong. And as long as there is someone willing to drive it, to tell its stories, to love its quirks and its flaws, it will never truly die. It will live on in the dreams of travelers, in the photographs on Instagram, in the memories of old-timers who remember when the highway was the only highway. It will live on in the sound of an engine humming at 70 miles an hour, in the smell of gasoline and hot asphalt, in the taste of a cold beer at a bar that has been there since the beginning. Route 66 changed America because it gave us a way to move, a way to grow, a way to become. And that is a legacy that will outlast the pavement itself. So keep driving. The road is waiting, and it always will be. There is something else that Route 66 taught us, something that is often overlooked in the rush to celebrate its history. It taught us about the beauty of impermanence. The road was never meant to last forever. It was a product of its time, a ribbon of concrete laid down by men with shovels and wheelbarrows, built to carry a nation through a depression and a war and a boom. And when the interstates came, the road began to fade. It was bypassed, forgotten, left to crack and crumble under the weight of the desert sun. But that fading is part of the story. It is the thing that makes the road real. In the town of Adrian, Texas, there is a small motel called the Midpoint Cafe. It sits at the exact halfway point of Route 66, where the miles to Chicago and the miles to Los Angeles are equal. The cafe is run by a woman named Dawn, who bought it on a whim after a divorce. She had never run a restaurant before. She had never lived in Texas, but she fell in love with the peeling paint and the creaky floors and the old neon sign that still flickers at night. She talks about her patrons like they are family. There is a couple from Germany who come every year, a man who rides a motorcycle cross-country with his dog in a sidecar, a retired truck driver who stops by just to sit and drink coffee and say nothing at all. Dawn will tell you that the road changes people. It brings them together. It strips away the pretenses and leaves only the truth. And that truth is the same now as it was in 1930. The road is a place where you can be yourself. It does not care about your job or your bank account or your politics. It only cares that you are moving, that you are willing to see what lies ahead. There is a stretch in New Mexico where the road runs through a small pueblo, and the locals still sell handmade jewelry from blankets laid on the ground. They will tell you about the spirits that guard the road, the ones who watch over travelers who are lost or tired or afraid. They will offer you a piece of turquoise and a blessing, and if you accept, you are part of a tradition that goes back centuries, long before the road was even imagined. So keep driving. The road is waiting, and it always will be. But as you drive, remember that the road is not just a line on a map. It is a living thing, a creature of asphalt and memory and hope. It has its own heartbeat, its own voice, and if you listen closely, you will hear it. You will hear the hum of a million tires, the laughter of a million children, the prayers of a million souls. You will hear the story of America told 1 mile at a time, and you will know that you are part of it, a traveler on the Mother Road, a keeper of the flame. That is the gift of Route 66. That is why it changed America forever, and that is why it will never truly disappear. It lives in every road trip, every sunset, every diner where a stranger shares a smile. It lives in you, so drive on. The road has more to say.